when I got diagnosed with cancer a couple of years ago, I could be gone in a couple of years. And I remember thinking, I'm so lucky that I have cancer and not my child, not my husband, not my sister.
Hello and welcome to Behind Numbers. Today's guest is Asya, someone who has seen the startup world from almost every single angle. As a chief revenue officer for then founding her own startup, and now as an investor and venture partner backing the next generation of founders. Welcome to Behind Numbers, Asya.
Thank you. Thank you, Alessandro. Happy to be here.
It is so great to have you here. And I would like to start with one thing because when people generally give the intro about you, they will start with a title. But now I'm curious more of if we remove every single title, roles, and link it in completely, who is really Asya?
Great question. I think that's pretty easy for me to answer. I'm a mama of 4 children. So very often, I myself, Asya Bradley, I'm a mom first. I'm a mom, I'm a human, I'm a friend, I'm a sister. That's kind of my focus. I'm a wife, but I identify myself more through my relationships that I have with the loved ones in my life, more so than my title or any kind of job I've had. But yeah, and I also take that into my work. So I feel like I'm human first before I am anything else. But being that human and that woman first is what I think has made me more successful in everything that I've done.
Being a human and a mom and a wife first, which are the things that you need or you had to give up in order to be as successful as you are and as you were?
Yeah. So I actually delayed being a mother. And so all of my pregnancies are what the medical world calls geriatric pregnancies. And essentially that means if you are 35 and above when you were pregnant. So all 4 of them have been that. So I would say I did delay. I won't say I gave up or had to sacrifice, but I did delay. And every sort of decision has its pros and cons. So the pros being that by the time I did decide to have children, it was very intentional. I had a home already set up. We had an income, we had things ready to receive babies. And then, of course, the con is I'm going to be 70-year-olds when my kids are 20, potentially. And so there's things like that you think about, like, ugh, did I do the right thing? Do I have enough energy? If I'd had these babies in my 20s, would I be running around? And maybe now I'd have an empty nest and I'd have more time for myself. So everything has its pros and cons, but then everything is about give and take in life, right? You can't do everything at the same time, and you can't get everything you want immediately all the time. And so you do have to prioritize, right? What is more important now? And that can take place in, for example, when I was founding a company and my partner, I would say to Matt, I'd say, hey, Matt, like, I got to work late. I have to do this and this and this. And he understood fully because he's also a founder. And so he understood that mindset and he was able to step in. And so obviously we didn't have as much time for each other that as we would have wanted to, right? When you're with someone you love, you want to spend every single moment with them, and we can't. So I would say it's not necessarily a sacrifice, but it's more priorities shift and change based on what's going on in your life at any given moment.
How can you choose what comes first? So, how do you really prioritize things?
I mean, you're asking tough questions. You're asking really tough questions. I do have a decision framework that I just sort of operate by. And I do look at the short term versus long term gains. I look at opportunity cost. I look at the amount of energy that I would need to expend in order to do something well. So I like to prioritize where I know that I'm going to be able to do something in a way that nobody else will be able to do it. And that's something worth pursuing. Everything I do, I think about how does this improve the world that my children are going to inherit? So if I'm making a decision on something, it's going to be, oh, okay, do I focus on this startup? Do I invest in this company here? Or am I looking at this other company that is a little bit of a longer term play, but hey, they're building something around sustainability that I think is going to be great for the planet. that I think as a human I'm going to be proud of and my children are going to be proud of, right? And my community is going to need. So I prioritize those things higher. And then at the very, very last bottom rung is like, how does it serve me? Which sucks because I don't think that's the right way to do it, but I haven't learned how to do it otherwise. So I have a mentality where it's if I can give first, that's what tends to take priority because I really want to make sure that whatever skill I have is being used and needed. So if it's needed, let's make sure it's out there. But yeah, so my personal needs tend to be at the very, very bottom after every other need is kind of prioritized. And again, starting from the global mindset of like the planet, the world, to family, friends, business, of course, is in there because you do still have to make money to live in this world. And then at the very bottom is like me. But yeah,
So I don't know if it's the right or wrong way, but what I can tell you that is a marvelous way. And thinking first about your impact that you can have on this world, I think that is a fascinating way to think about things. And now I'm curious to go back for a second because those kind of mindset, I'm sure that you didn't come up with that kind of mindset from day one. So, which are the things that you think that led you to the mindset that you have right now?
I think for me, it comes back to never forgetting where I've come from. And I think that's super important. If you've ever listened to Madonna's song, Little Star, where she basically is like wishing for her child to never forget where they come from. And I come from very humble beginnings. And I never take that for granted that if the stars hadn't aligned the way they did, if my parents hadn't had the foresight to move to Canada, I could still be in Pakistan. I could even be dead. Infant mortality rates when I was born were super high. Girl births were not prioritized, right? I wasn't even registered as a child. I don't have a birth certificate. So I could just be non existent. And when you think about that, every single thing I do is there's nothing special about me, Asya. There is something very special about what I can bring to the world now that I am here. Do I want to just be something that never was had any impact on this world, which is what would have happened. And so I don't take that for granted. I think for me it's like I'm very lucky that I'm here. I could have easily been somewhere else and not doing what I do, and so I really do love what I do and I put a lot of passion into it. And then I also think of all the people, all the women, all the girls out there just like me that, again, don't have that opportunity. So when I worked for the United Nations, for example, for a while, I just saw a lot of these children that had nothing, right? Alessandra, they had absolutely nothing. And I was working in tech prior to that. And I remember thinking at a certain moment, like I was working at Cisco Systems, making good money, right? Wonderful life, living in Amsterdam. We had opened up the Europe, Middle East, and Africa headquarters. I could have kept doing that, but I couldn't. In the back of my mind, I kept thinking, is this what I'm going to do? Just make money and put it in my bank account and buy another car, buy a TV. What am I going to do with this? What am I actually giving back to this world? And I grew up in a way where every summer my parents would have us come up with different projects of how we could give back to the community when we would go back home and visit our village. And so every summer, we're 5 kids, we would come up with ideas. And so one year it was like, "Oh, I'm gonna run a school for the village kids." And took a bunch of textbooks, took a bunch of school supplies, and we ran a school. Another time it was like medical stuff where we were focused on. So we took a bunch of medical supplies, but we would raise money, we would take donations, supplies as donations, and just take them over with us and do that to give back. So I think that's always been just part of my upbringing and also just being an immigrant, right? I learned that from the immigrant communities where no matter how little you had, I would see these people that had come to Canada with just the shirts on their back, Alessandro. And if they had a bag of rice, they made sure that everyone in their community got some of that rice. They didn't just take that bag of rice and keep it in their cupboard, right? It was like, hey guys, I got a bag of rice. And here I divvied it up for everybody. And everyone was doing the same. with literally very little. But there wasn't that scarcity mindset. It was very much an abundance mindset. It wasn't a thing of, I have this now, I have to guard it. This is for me. And if I share it, I'm going to have less. It wasn't. And in the Arabic world, there's a term for that. It's barakah, right? So that whatever you do actually amplifies and sort of magnifies. It's kind of like, you know, Jesus creating wine out of water, right? It's about how you can set a table and the food just never ends. And people are still enjoying and eating to their full bellies. But because there is that abundance mindset, and that's where I want the world to get to, is that abundance mindset. How do we all get to that point where we realize that if my neighbor is happy and successful, that's going to make me happy and successful? Not a situation of like, I need to take whatever I can from my neighbor, and that's the only way that I can measure success. And it's unfortunate because I think a lot of communities are like that right now. A lot of what's going on in the world, right, is about that grabbing land, grabbing money, grabbing whatever you can grab. And not thinking about the greater impact. Um, but yeah, and I'll pause there because I think that's a lot, and I could keep going on and on about this, but yeah, I'll pause there.
Talking with great people like yourself, they have one thing always in common. They have been through struggles or hard times, or while they were younger, their parents taught them to give back. That's the thing that I find fascinating. And all those great people, it seems that they're looking at struggles in a different way than normal people like myself. When something bad is happening to me, I'm always stating, why is it happening
I
to me? That is not fair.
yeah,
While the rest of people like yourself are seeing struggles in a different way. They're seeing it more, how can I learn from it?
yeah. I mean, it's how do you live this life otherwise? Because challenges will come, and a lot of people will say, like, Asya, you were in Canada, then you were in Amsterdam, then you were in Cairo, and then you came to the US, and you know what? How did you decide to do all those things? A lot of the time, you make all kinds of plans, but when the world delivers something to you that is different from what you originally planned, you can either sit there and cry and be like, but I wanted that. Or you can think there must be some other wisdom to this. Maybe there's something that I'm just not seeing. And you have to trust that the world is putting you where you need to be and that your body, your spirit, I'm not a religious person, but your spirit knows where it needs to go next. And so you can either go against it and expend a lot of energy in that, or you can say, okay, well, where can I make the best impact in this path? And then you kind of just go along that path. But being someone who's not spiritual, like not religious, I am very spiritual in that I don't know if I believe in any kind of an afterlife. I don't believe in like heaven and hell, like that kind of thing. But I do think like when I'm gone, without going into too many details about the illness, but like when I got diagnosed with cancer a couple of years ago, I had to face that, right? You face your mortality and you start thinking, I could be gone. I could be gone in a couple of years. And what will I leave behind? And I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to, if there is an afterlife, am I going to be a ghost that's floating around and I can watch my children as they grow? I don't think so. And so it's like, I need to make sure that whatever I do is done here while I'm physically able to do it on this earth. And I think a lot of folks are trying to earn points so that they have a pleasant time in heaven, or they're trying to earn points to avoid hell. But the focus is not on this world. And I think, yes, you can have all of that. You can believe in all of that stuff too. But don't forget that your impact here also needs to be of a certain quality. Otherwise, these points that you're collecting are not genuine. They're not authentic, right? And so if you truly are a God believing person, don't you think that God would know what you're really doing? That God will know what's in your head. You can't fool God, right? If you truly believe in the God the way that most people do. So I sort of see it as that like, you're only here for a certain period of time. How are you going to spend that time? And you're right, there was a moment where people were like, "Oh my gosh, like, why'd this happen to you? You're already eating healthy, you exercise, you do all of these great things." And to be honest, Alessandra, I never thought, "Why me?" I just thought, "Thank goodness it's not somebody else." Like, I have the resources, I have the mindset to be able to tackle this in a way that, you know, of one of my acquaintances, her son has a glioblastoma. And I actually got connected to her shortly after I was diagnosed. And I remember even that, like, why was I connected to her at that point? Why did the universe bring her into my life? And when I saw her with her beautiful son, and I thought, holy shit, I am so lucky. I'm so lucky that I have cancer, right? And not my child, not my husband, not my sister. And I truly, truly, as crazy as it sounds, I felt so lucky that I had cancer. And it's tough. It's not easy. And I'm not trying to every person that deals with this kind of looks at it in a different way. And everyone processes it in their own way. So I totally get it when other people are angry. And a lot of my friends who are going through similar struggles go through all those different stages of grief, negotiation, anger, finally acceptance. And I don't know, maybe I'm still in shock, who knows? But none of that has happened yet. So it's all been like a, okay, what do I do with this now? Let's get to work and trying to then get involved with the cancer community and becoming an ambassador for the American Cancer Society and volunteering with UCSF and their different cancer programs and trying to improve the experience for people going through cancer treatments, taking care of their loved ones as they go through it. But that's kind of been my focus then is like, it sucks to be in this position. How can I make it better for anybody else that who happens to get this diagnosis after me?
Yeah, it is. It is nice and sad to hear that so many times people are thinking and have started to think about really their impact in this world when something like this happens, because we are generally so selfish and so just looking at what is happening to us that it is nice to hear your story and what you are doing. But from the other side, I'm starting thinking, well, why does it need to happen these kind of things so that the people can actually see that
Right.
we are not just our small group or our family. We need to think on a broader scale. Thinking on a broader scale, sometimes when I'm thinking about which could be my impact on this world, I feel kind of overwhelmed. So, where do I start? What do I do? Is it really make any difference what I'm doing? So, I'm curious to know, what do you think that based on what you're doing right now, you are making that impact, and where are you making it?
Yeah. I'll give an example of when I was a founder. When I first moved to the US and I wasn't able to open up a bank account. And I looked at why wasn't I able to open up a bank account? What was the reason for it? I had to get my brother to co-sign so that I could open a bank account. And this is after being an executive, international executive. I couldn't get a credit card. My limit was like, I think 100 or $500. It was super low. It was ridiculous. I had to start from scratch. And so at that moment, it was like the impact I wanted to make was make sure no other woman that comes into this country has to face that issue of getting a male to co-sign for her. So that was one thing. Like you kind of build out of necessity in a way and to avoid somebody else having to go through the same struggles. And I feel like that's kind of been a little bit the sort of theme of my life in a way. So for example, I did a documentary project with Amnesty International, and it was focused on honor killings in certain communities. And it just was something that I've had this sort of sense of wanting to stick up for the women that couldn't speak for themselves, that couldn't take care of themselves and are basically dealing with a lot of adversity and just finding those things where visiting that shelter and seeing these women, some that had been burned, others that were there with their children who had been gone through so much abuse. And then ultimately, some of the women that I interviewed were actually killed, right? After I'd finished the documentary and continued to live my comfortable life. And so I think the impact, however small, and even if you don't feel that you've made an impact, right? You have. I'm not in touch with all those women in the shelter, but I know that I did make an impact while I was there, just having that connection with those women. And then just bringing it forward to as a founder, I would go to all these different events, these rooms that were otherwise closed to me. And I became a founder, and suddenly I'm invited to these events, for example, at Money 2020, and there's all these receptions. And I remember at the time going to these and not seeing anyone that looked like me there. And when I would talk to the different VCs and people, they'd be like, it's a pipeline problem. We can't find these female founders. You're one of the very, very few out there. And it's amazing. And so I thought, why do we not have more female founders that are getting funding? And so I started writing the check, right? And I just thought, I'm just going to be the investor, right? And so I started writing the check then into people that I wanted to see in those rooms because they weren't coming from otherwise. So I was like, okay, how do I make sure that they show up in these rooms? And so I became the first check for a lot of people that otherwise weren't getting funding. And then I used my network to help them raise their subsequent rounds. And so I definitely made an impact in the lives of those founders. And then graduating to becoming an LP and then thinking, okay, I can't keep doing these single checks. At that point, I had around 30, 40 companies that I had direct invested in. And then I thought, I can't support them. Doing the due diligence is a lot of work. And I realized, you know what? I can find people that invest like me, that have heart, that have a heart and mind is well balanced, and started writing LP checks then into different funds. So, like Lolita from Ganas Ventures, Aileen Lee from Cowboy Ventures, Kinship Ventures, which is like Gwyneth Paltrow's funds. But like going through all these different firms and essentially saying, I know that you're going to invest the way that I would spend my money. Started writing those. So now I know that the impact now is multiplied as well because they can each write 40 checks, whereas I would just be writing a single check for myself. So I think it's stuff like that where you have to graduate and you try to do what you can do. And then so I would say just start small. Start as small as like, look at your neighbor. Are they elderly? If you see them walking with their grocery bags, do you just run out and help them carry the bags to their door? And these are things that even like I teach my kiddos. So we had this neighbor was a very, very grumpy lady, very grumpy older lady. Clearly was going through some pain and was going through some issues, but she would always be like screaming and complaining and like, oh my God, the bikes are here. And oh, you can't put this thing on your porch and whatever. And I remember one day seeing her struggling and she had four or five bags of groceries, but she had a wrist brace on and she was struggling with the bags. And so I just said to my sons, I was like, hey, guys, go over there, help Sarah, help her bring the groceries in. Mom, she's mean to us. She's, blah, blah, blah. I was like, it doesn't matter. Go help her. And so they went. So they went and they each grabbed bags from her. And she was just like, okay, what's happening? Initially, she was like, wait, why are you grabbing my bags? And so they grabbed them and they said, let us take them to your door. And so they walked them to the door and she just stood there and she looked at the boys and she was just like, thank you. And can you believe it? This lady now is like the most pleasant lady.
Yeah.
So pleasant. Right? Now she comes out and she's got little toys for the kids. She's like coming out saying, oh, did you get a new bike? Oh, you learned a new trick. Let me see it. She is now such a sweet person, but she felt seen, right? And she felt the human connection. And it didn't take much, right? But just her feeling connected to a human being, another human being. And I feel like we've lost that. The world has become so individualistic. Friends and I actually were talking, my sister and I were talking about the loss of the extended family. So in South Asian households, for example, you would have multiple generations living under the same roof. And it was so helpful because, different people have different strengths. And so if someone was very good at cooking, they could focus on the cooking. If someone was very good at filing taxes and doing the finances, they could focus on that. If someone was really great at taking care of the children, they would do that. And so everyone had their strengths. And so we didn't all have to be experts at everything. We could focus and we could do the things that we really loved and naturally excelled at because we knew that the community was going to fill in all the gaps. And we knew that we needed the community that way, right? Now, it's every single man is an island. Every single woman is an island. And then when you get married, even still, you're two islands that are trying to get together. So I think that individualistic piece needs to go away. And when you make that human connection, you'll feel that impact. And it has ripple effects. Don't expect, like I always say, don't expect this like whole big bang kind of a thing happening because that's not even necessarily what's going to impact you in your community, but look for the little things that you can do very easily, very quickly. Don't try to come up with well, I'm trying to find this like really big way that I can make an impact. No, just help a little worm that's in the street. Help a caterpillar. If you see a caterpillar in the path, pick up that caterpillar, put it in the grass, right? If you see a worm that's on the sidewalk and it's like almost dying, give it some water, then pick it up and put it in the grass. It's easy. And you definitely made an impact on the life of that caterpillar that suddenly becomes a monarch butterfly that is going to pollinate and make sure that we have almonds, right? It all comes back to you in the end. It's like, you know, again,
Absolutely.
quoting Madonna, it all comes back to you. Everything I give you comes back to me.
Definitely, yes. And plus, if every one of us is going to do a little thing, it is like in finance, it compounds. And
Yes.
so it can get bigger. And by the way, on the bank account side, I totally hear you because when we moved over here to the US, it was the same thing. It was a pain. We couldn't open one. So I totally hear you. And as yet, we are always closing the podcast with one question. If you could go back and change just one thing, it could be a decision that you made, it could be a mindset, it could be something that you wish that you would have known. What would
Yeah.
it be and why?
I think I would focus on love more. I would absolutely focus on love more. I think there were moments where I was very brain heavy, mind heavy, and I was very mind forward and the heart took second. And I think I would just lean in a lot more with love. I think the world always needs more love, all right? You can never go wrong with putting out more love in the world. So I think that would be it is like, I wish I just put in way, 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 way more love. But you know, when you go through a certain age and you deal with adversity and it takes time to learn. And there are times when you just lash out. You lash out at the world, right? I haven't been this zen all my life. I've been a psycho too. And so those are times where I wish I'd gone back and been like, hey, hey, lady, like chill, chill. You'll be fine. Just use your heart more. But I think it's that. And I think a lot of people in the world need to let go of a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. You can focus on that. And it really sucks. But once you start talking about what you've been through, you realize that you're not alone. And you realize that everybody has been through something really shitty. Like, even as you're saying, I haven't been through much, I'm sure there's stuff that you could like go back to and be like, oh, yeah, actually, that was really shitty. So we've all been through stuff. And I think it gets very easy to default to being angry and being angry at the world and not caring. And I think yeah, that's probably what I would do is like go back and keep reminding myself at any of those stages and be like, Asya, you're going to be okay. Asya, lead with your heart. Your heart's going to help you here. The hatred, the anger, the sadness, none of that is going to help you. And trying to make somebody else angry or sad or trying to hurt someone else is not going to help you at all. So I think that just gonna, I would love more.
And in this period, love it is really needed. So thank you for sharing that. But Asia, so thank you so much for sharing your story. It has been a great pleasure to have you on Behind Numbers.
Thank you. It's been really great. I love this conversation. You never have this going on in the tech world. So I appreciate you for making this world. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And to everyone else listening, thank you for joining us. If you have enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow Behind Numbers for more stories from the leaders shaping the future of business and finance. I am Alessandro Cozzi. See you next time.